So welcome everybody. It's fantastic to be back in person here with all of you. And I'm Victoria Esses. I'm co-chair of the Pathways to Prosperity Partnership. This is Katie Crocker, who is our new sector co-chair representing CISA-ACSE. It is really a pleasure to be welcoming you here today to our 10th annual national conference. We're very excited to be celebrating 1 decade of P2P and to be back in person, of course, with all of you, as well as having many people also attending the conference virtually. As always, we're pleased to see our conference grow. As we respond to the feedback we receive, we constantly work to try and improve what we're offering, and we make sure that the topics we are addressing are timely and relevant. We're very pleased with how the agenda has come together for the next 2 days, and we very much look forward to the presentations and all the discussions we will be having. As you know, the theme of this year's conference is Next Gen Canada, Immigration and Diversity as Pathways to Prosperity. And as the Pathways to Prosperity celebrates its 10th anniversary, we would like to honor the foundations of immigration and settlement in Canada, take stock of where we are today, and embark on a journey of planning for the future. We're glad that all of you are here to join us on that journey. And we would like to thank all the sponsors for this conference, including my consultant, BICAPIC, Blue Social, Calgary Catholic Immigration Society, COPA National, New Canadians, Pre-Arrival Canada Program of the YMCA of Greater Toronto, World Education Services, Threads Cultural Conversations, and the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. And in addition, of course, we're very grateful for the generous support of our main funder, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. Now, I would like to acknowledge that we're gathered today on the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. We recognize the Algonquins as the customary keepers and defenders of the Ottawa River watershed and its tributaries. We honor their long history of welcoming many nations to this beautiful territory, and we uphold and uplift the voice and values of our host nation. Further, we respect and we affirm the inherent and treaty rights of all Indigenous peoples across the land. We honor the commitments to self-determination and sovereignty we have made to Indigenous nations and peoples. We also acknowledge the historical oppressions of lands, cultures, and original peoples in what we now know as Canada, and we fervently believe that we should contribute to the healing and decolonizing journey we all share today. It's my pleasure to present our special guests, Nadine and Scott McKenzie. Nadine is of both Huron, Wendat, and Inuit descent, and currently leads the Naawakwe Singers Drum Circle. She's a trained facilitator of the Kairos blanket exercise and has led countless events across Canada and has also introduced it in Paris, France. And her husband, Scott McKenzie, is a third-generation immigrant whose ancestors hail from Scotland. Scott is also a member of the Naawakwe Singers Drum Circle, and he will be joining Nadine today. Nadine, on behalf of the Pathways to Prosperity Partnership, we thank you for joining us today to officially open our national conference. We offer this sacred tobacco to you to demonstrate our respect to you, your community, and your teaching.
Kwe, Omaratu, Nadine Jatsi, Wende, Wendat Inde, Hatinyone, Runyo, Aye, Turute. Good morning, friends. My name is Nadine, and my ancestors are Wendat of the Bear Clan. This morning, we are going to start with a smudge, which is a spiritual practice of burning sacred medicinal plants to cleanse ourselves and help us to connect with the Creator. May your hands be cleansed, that they create beautiful things. May your feet be cleansed, that they may take you wherever you most need to be. May your heart be cleansed, that you might be right here, that you might hear its messages clearly. May your throat be cleansed, that you might speak rightly when words are needed. May your eyes be cleansed, that you might see the signs of wonders of this world. And may the people and the space be washed clean by the smoke of these fragrant plants, and may the same smoke carry our prayers spiraling to the heavens. Una awete distriotat, niskarawato oma ndoriora, ataquatomasonio oma ndume indeo mesta, ataquatomasonio indesta induste, ataquatomasonio indurata ne deriskuna shoa, ataquatomasonio indawete indequa, ataquatomasonio indawete inde yarota, ataquatomasonio indawete inde yakwa, ataquatomasonio inde yajushoa a, ataquatomasonio indehe no nehe inde ya ura, ataquatomasonio soma yea demete ya yandishra, ataquatomasonio inde omet shuta a awatsote ya yandishra, ataquatomasonio indawate inde hatironio, ataquatomasonio inde ute ingaya nidite hati indara de yarona ye, ataquatomasonio inde somame induju indik yote, ine ayemtenye indishe, indea hara. I am thankful for my brothers and sisters who have gathered here this morning with me in creating this circle in spirit, friendship, and song, and I honor each and one of, I'm sorry, I honor each of you. It is the belief of many indigenous people that all drums are connected to the great drum, which represents the heartbeat of the earth. And when the sacred is removed from our lives, we lose touch with the natural. We lose touch with our natural rhythm, ourselves, each other, and our Creator. We forget that we are spiritual beings in a human experience. One tool that helps us to remember that we are sacred is the drum. When we drum, magic happens, and the drum becomes our teacher and has powerful medicine to give us when we respect and honor it. Each drum has its own unique voice and vibration, and by honoring the sacred outside of ourselves, we reclaim the sacred that lies within the core of each one of us. We must try to let go of doing it right and stay within our hearts. When we pray from our heart, the Spirit helpers show up. When we're in our heads, we separate from each other with our opinions and beliefs. Before we are born, the sound we hear and connect with is the heartbeat of our mother in the womb, and the drum is the heartbeat of the Earth Mother. All the rhythms of the drums are based on the heartbeat. The drum is feminine, and its origins lie within the goddess. Drumming creates balance. When we open ourselves to the spirit of the drum, the tree spirit, and the spirit of the deer, elk, moose, or bear, magic begins to happen. The more you are present in the moment, the more the drum's medicine begins to work. When you awaken to and honor the rhythm of the drum, you awaken to inner healing, which manifests outwardly towards the planet. The more drums that are made and played, the more healing will take place. The concept of the red path aligns with my value of being on the right path in life and in harmony with the Creator. The red path is a metaphor for living a spiritual way of life, and all the people on the red path are interconnected, a circle of people standing hand in hand, people in this world, people between people in the spirit world, star people, animal people, stone people, river people, tree people, making a sacred hoop. Only we can walk our path, but we will encounter many others on that road, many who are standing, some are walking. We may even see some who are not on the path, but we're all on a different part of our journey, aren't we? While walking the red path, we are walking in the right direction in a good way, using the 7 grandfather teachings to guide us along our journey. In finding our way back to the red path or supporting us along the way, the drum and our songs help us to reclaim the sacred that dwells within each one of us. Let us begin this morning with the Creator Song and Guando Day.
Welcome our ancestors who have joined us this morning.
Miigwech. The next song we're going to sing for you this morning is a water song. Water is life, and it reminds us of the swirling eddies, rushing currents, urging us to balance the movement with the ebbs and flows of life and to embrace the stillness. The next song we're going to perform for you this morning is called The Longest Walk, and this song is to honor all those who took part in the civil rights movement in the 1960s, which included Aboriginals as well as African Americans. It's a song of unity, people coming together to face adversity and working together towards a common goal. As we play this song, I invite you to close your eyes and imagine yourself alone, embarking on a journey to the unknown. And as we continue on our path, we meet a stranger who happens to be going in the same direction. You might talk to them and discover new and interesting things about one another, and even discover values that you have in common. You come to lean on one another as you continue your journey. You have an ally, a friend. And as the song continues, it'll become faster and louder, symbolizing the others that you encounter on this journey, each one contributing strengths, skills, and a voice. With this encouragement, your steps grow louder and firmer, with your own confidence getting stronger. You walk with pride because you are no longer alone. You and the others hold your head and heart high and united. The last repetition slows down and it is solemn. We reflect on our journey and we honor those who have died in pursuit of freedom, equality, and justice. From my heart to all of your hearts, Chi Megwech, for having us this morning. I wish you a productive and lovely 2 days. Tijame.
I just want to say what a great way to lead off a conference. Thank you so much, Nadine and Scott.
All right, good morning, everyone. Nice to see all of you today. So I get the distinct pleasure of welcoming our special guest, the Honourable Fraser, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, Canada. The Honourable Fraser has served as Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship since October of 2021. Minister Fraser previously served as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance and to the Minister of Middle Class Prosperity and Associate Minister of Finance from 2019 to 2021, and as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change from 2018 to 2019. In 2021, he also served concurrently as Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister. Minister Fraser was first elected as the Member of Parliament for Central Nova Scotia in 2015. Before entering politics, Minister Fraser had a successful legal career with one of Canada's top-ranked law firms, where he practiced commercial litigation and international dispute resolution. He holds a law degree from Dalhousie University, a master's degree in public international law from Leiden University in the Netherlands, and a Bachelor of Science from St. Francis Xavier University. Minister Fraser is a longtime volunteer. He has served as the Vice President of a local branch of the United Nations Association in Canada, acted as a research fellow with the Centre for International Sustainable Development Law, and provided pro bono legal services to the local BGC Club and vulnerable community members. So I'm really pleased to invite Minister Fraser to come and give a short address. Questions, please ask in Slido, and we will have a discussion session with Minister Fraser when he's done. Minister Fraser, over to you.
Hello and welcome everyone. And before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people on which we're meeting today, and to thank those who've opened the conference in such an appropriate way. You know, I'll stray from my prepared remarks if you'll indulge me. I think it's a very helpful way to kick off a conference that deals with immigration, to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples who've been here since time immemorial, and without them, the early settlers in this land would not have been able to build some of the communities, and I'm sure Canada would look very different today if it weren't for their welcoming nature that has now become a tradition where we all continue to welcome newcomers to these lands. You know, immigration is an interesting thing in Canada compared to other parts of the world. It's not something that we do, it's in large part who we are. I think it's who we've always been since before Confederation. With the exception of Indigenous peoples in the lands we now call Canada, every family that finds themselves in this part of the world had the opening chapter of their family history that includes the story of a migrant. My own family happened to land here about 250 years ago on a vessel from Scotland, not 10 minutes from where I live today. And if it weren't for that migration pattern, I'm sure that I would be somewhere else or perhaps not here at all. You know, it's been a really exciting opportunity. Last year, I think I was able to join you guys virtually, but to be here to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the organization, I think deserves a warm congratulations. So to the organizers, those who've been part of Pathways to Prosperity, congratulations. A 10-year anniversary is a big deal. And to see the work that you do every day, that's right. And to see the work that you do every day is rewarding from my perspective. It's one thing to get people to Canada. It's a whole other issue to make sure that they do well when they're here. Over the course of the past decade, you've been making an enormous difference in the lives of newcomers by helping them settle and to thrive. You should all be proud of the work that you do, and I hope you're able to take some time to really acknowledge what it means to be at this for such a long period of time. You know, I think sometimes in government we have the bad habit of making simple problems that are big more complicated than they need to be. That wasn't meant to be a joke. I see I got a couple of laughs. You know, realistically, I think when it comes to immigration, it boils down to a very simple concept to me. Canada needs more people. We need more people for a number of reasons. We need it for economic reasons. We need it for demographic reasons. We need it to make our communities more vibrant and dynamic places to live. And I think immigration can help us achieve each of those ends. When I look at the economic imperative for immigration, I think it's obvious. Walk down Main Street of any community in Canada and you'll see a help wanted sign in the window. We're dealing with one of the strongest economic recoveries of any advanced economy in the world. We've recently hit the lowest rate of unemployment in recorded history in this country at a time when there was 1 million empty jobs. When I look at what the next number of decades are going to look like, we're going to need people to work in the care economy. We're going to need people to fill key gaps in the labor force that are not just revealing themselves through those help wanted signs today, but the long-term skills gap that I see if we're trying to build a Canada that's going to succeed over the next generation. You know, as much as the labor shortage gets attention on issues surrounding immigration, the demographic trend has me far more concerned. You know, I come from a part of the country that has an aging population far more than most of Canada. But if you rewind the clock 50 years, you will have seen that this country had 7 workers for every retired person. Today, that number's closer to 3. In the part of the country that I come from, that number's closer to 2, and there's 7 people joining the workforce every year for every 10 that are leaving it. If we don't embrace immigration by bringing people here and setting them up for success, we're going to be in a world of hurt by the time I'm ready to retire. Our conversations about immigration won't be talking about labor shortages. It's going to be talking about whether we can afford to keep schools and hospitals open. This is not a theoretical piece of commentary. This is part of the lived experience that people in my community appreciate very much. When I first ran for office back in 2015, I remember 2 of the hottest issues on the campaign trail involved the closure of the River John Elementary School and the loss of the mental health unit at the Aberdeen Hospital, the largest hospital in northern Nova Scotia. Those problems don't happen when you have people moving into your community. They happen when people are leaving. The biggest challenges that we're facing now, like most of the country, are whether we can build housing quickly enough to accommodate all the people who want to move to our communities, rather than talking about schools and hospitals shuttering because so many people are leaving. There are real challenges associated with growth, associated with immigration and integration. But I take those challenges any day of the week over problems that are associated with depopulation, people moving away from small towns and rural communities. You know, it's something else that has been on my mind as I've watched some of this play out in my own community over the last number of years. Though we embraced immigration in rural Nova Scotia as a growth strategy to protect against some of these trends to help grow the economy, what I've seen is my community's become a cooler place to call home. What I've seen when the community started welcoming Syrian refugees is that we have new Middle Eastern restaurants for the first time in the history of my community. What I see when I go to the farmer's market, where I used to get products from 10 minutes down the road, I can now experience music, cuisine, and culture from every corner of the world. You know, it's a really beautiful thing when I see that we've not only created a community that is more welcoming to more newcomers, but the more vibrant our community becomes, the more people who grew up in my area that moved away want to come back home. We're now seeing people bring their grandkids home so they can become closer to their grandparents. And this wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have a revolution kickstarted with newcomers moving into the small town where I'm from. You know, it's just, j'ai oublié, c'est nécessaire pour moi de promouvoir la langue française, la culture française. Quand j'arrivais au Ottawa, je ne parle pas un mot en français. Alors, je m'excuse si j'ai fait des erreurs. Mais c'est essentiel. Si nous continuons d'augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants en général, c'est nécessaire aussi pour augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants francophones aussi et pour soutenir la communauté francophone. C'est nécessaire pour soutenir la communauté francophone parce que quand j'ai des conversations avec mes collègues francophones, ils me disent c'est impossible pour des petites communautés francophones au Québec de voir un avenir au Canada avec un plus grand nombre de nouveaux arrivants en général. C'est essentiel pour augmenter le nombre qui viennent des pays francophones et qui habitent dans la communauté francophone au Canada. Mais c'est nécessaire aussi pour soutenir les organisations d'établissement pour continuer de proviser des services pour les personnes francophones. You know, it's really important that we protect who we are, and we allow everybody to see themselves in the Canada that we want to build. And I think it's refreshing when I actually speak to communities who have embraced immigration, because sometimes fear of the stranger disappears when they come to realize that we can continue to improve the quality of our community by becoming more diverse, by embracing one another's different cultures. À l'heure actuelle, l'immigration nous aide à pourvoir des postes, à diversifier nos communautés et offrir à des nouveaux arrivants l'occasion de venir au Canada. Et c'est avec l'aide de vous, en nos incroyables partenaires, que nous pourrons aider les nouveaux arrivants à s'intégrer dans leur communauté et assurer le succès à long terme. You know, I spent a lot of my time making the case for immigration more broadly. And I think sometimes what gets lost in the public narrative is the importance of settlement services along the way. You know, I see organizations that are doing yeoman's work to support newcomers with language training, with helping people get set up with bank accounts, showing people how to ride public transit and access basic services in their community. But one of the things I don't think the public really appreciate is the soft supports and how important they are for people to actually be set up for success in a place that they're going to really feel like is their home for the next generation. You know, in my own community, I mentioned we started to welcome refugees in larger numbers for the first time in response to the crisis in Syria. What gives me faith that the families who've come to my community are going to stay is not that there's language training available. That's essential. There's no question. It's not that there are people helping with employment assistance. That's essential too. But what really communicates for me that people are going to treat my community like their new home is when I take my daughter to skating lessons, and I've got 4- and 5-year-old kids on the ice with us, and I see one of the volunteers with a local organization run out to the ice with a pair of mittens that their parents didn't know that they needed to have. It's that sort of local appreciation for what it means to be a member of our community. Not only to remember you got to have your mittens on at wintertime, but to be thoughtful enough for somebody to have brought them in the car in case that was going to happen. These are the kinds of things that I see play out in communities right across Canada that really communicate to people that they're not just a number. They're not just one of 500,000 people who are going to be coming here annually by 2025. They're a real person with a real family that we want to have in our communities. Now, when I see the look on that kid's face when they feel like they've been given a gift, a pair of mittens on the ice, and I see that they feel every bit as normal as my daughter, who's now been in our community for generations, it's the most beautiful thing I can imagine. And it's an incredible thing because this is the story of Canada that's played out over the course of many generations. You know, it's important to me as well that we insist that immigration is not just something for big cities in Canada. It's necessary if we're going to continue to grow small communities. And frankly, with some of the challenges and pressures on social services and housing and public services that bigger cities are facing, we need to continue to push people out into smaller communities that have not traditionally embraced immigration as a growth strategy. You know, I've mentioned some of the stories from my own community. I want to create a lot more of those stories. I don't know if you will have read in detail the immigration levels plan, this room probably more than just about any other in Canada, but we put a big focus on making sure that we're creating incentive for people to consider moving to small communities by continuing to grow the number of spaces available in programs like the Atlantic Immigration Program, by making sure that provincial governments have an opportunity to bring more people in through their provincial programs that get people to different communities where their needs are greatest, by expanding the rural and northern immigration pilot, by insisting, en français, c'est nécessaire d'insister que les provinces et les territoires et le gouvernement fédéral continuent d'accueillir des nouveaux arrivants francophones. It's really important that we continue to allow every community, big, small, francophone, anglophone, and otherwise, to continue to see themselves in a potential for growth as we go forward. I'm really excited about the path that lays ahead. It's not going to be easy, and I'm going to count on everyone in this room to continue to support our newcomers. But by continuing our work together, we have an opportunity to build something special, to continue to build something special, and that's what Canada is going to look like over the course of the next generation. I want to draw your attention to one program in particular before I leave the microphone, because I have huge ambition over the next number of years to continue to grow this program. That's the EMPP. I don't know if you're familiar with the Employment Mobility's Pathways pilot. Les projets pilons sur les voies d'accès à la mobilité économique, PPVAME, est une initiative novatrice visant à reconnaître les talents et les habilités des réfugiés en les accueillant par l'intermédiaire des volets d'immigration économique. Le PPVME combine la réinstallation de réfugiés à l'immigration économique. Cette voie d'accès offre une solution avantageuse pour tous les parties. Elle aide les réfugiés qualifiés à immigrer au Canada dans le cadre de programmes économiques existants, tout en donnant aux employeurs l'accès à un nouveau bassin de candidats qualifiés pour pouvoir des postes vacants. The reason that I want to draw your attention to the EMPP is that I think we need to have a collective mindset as Canadians and as a global community of people who want to support newcomers. I think sometimes we're very proud of Canada's record when it comes to refugee resettlement, and we should be, make no mistake. Over the past 3 years, Canada has welcomed more refugees than any country in the world. In each of the last 2 years, we're responsible for the resettlement of more than 1/3 of the total number of refugees, according to the UNHCR, that have been resettled anywhere. But I think sometimes as Canadians, we think this is something that we're doing that's nice for a vulnerable person, rather than something that also serves us self-interest. Because I can tell you, the refugees who I've met in our community, they come with so much more than the contents of their bags. They're offering skills to our communities. You know, it's been a particularly unique experience in my own community. I'm sure many people in this room will have heard the now global success story of Peace by Chocolate. The shed that the community helped put up for the Haddad family is less than a 1-minute walk from the hospital where I was born. Tarek was the first Syrian refugee to land in Nova Scotia, and the first one I met. He joined a road hockey game shortly after Christmas in 2015, had no idea what he was doing. He's a terrible hockey player. He's a hell of a guy. But what I've seen from that experience has been a reawakening amongst people who live in my community, but the value that newcomers contribute, whether they come as economic migrants or as refugees. You know, Tarek will tell you, although there was an overwhelming amount of support from the community of Antigonish, Nova Scotia, there was also some xenophobia that doesn't necessarily get the same press. One of the first people that he met in our community has told him that he feels bad for what his family's gone through, but he didn't know why he had to come to our town and take his job. That gentleman was the first person that Tarek hired to work on the factory floor at Peace by Chocolate. There's now more than 50 people who work in my rural community for that factory. They've now opened one of the largest retail spaces on the Halifax waterfront. You should go if you get a chance. There was a lot of chance for the Haddad family to land in Nova Scotia at all, to even come to Canada at all. And I think to myself, what if we didn't leave this to chance? What if we actually embraced refugee resettlement as part of an economic growth strategy? We could create more opportunities like this. I met a gentleman in Toronto a couple of weeks ago named Omar, who's one of the top cloud computing experts for Shopify. In my own community, there's a friend of mine, Bahati, who's constantly being profiled by the United Nations as an example in refugee resettlement. She's working in a long-term care facility, helping my friends' grandparents age in the same community where their grandkids are growing up. It's an extraordinary thing, and I want everybody to consider what we can do to support EMPP candidates, because I intend to continue to scale this program up to create opportunities for more refugees to come as economic migrants and recognize they just happen to be displaced, but still have an opportunity to provide immense value to our communities. I think we're at a pivotal moment to conclude here, folks, in our economic history. I think we're facing one of the greatest economic opportunities of our lifetime as the world is looking how to live their lives differently. People are willing to move to a new country to pursue opportunity in numbers that we've never seen before. And Canada has become the world's top destination for people who are thinking about leaving their country of origin to pursue economic opportunity. Je suis impatient de voir nous mener à notre collaboration continue visant à appuyer tous les nouveaux arrivants. Le dialogue constructif de planification à long terme qui se tiendra au cours des prochains jours jouera un rôle crucial dans notre réussite permanente. With the support and resources we all will put in place to continue to support newcomers, I know that we're going to continue to enjoy the benefits of immigration and remain a top destination of choice for people around the world. I want to say thank you. I want to wish you all the best over the next couple of days in this conference. So proud to be here with you, and so proud to be a part of the Team Canada that's welcoming people to improve our collective lot in life. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Minister Fraser, and thank you also for agreeing to hang out with us for a little while and answer some questions. Okay. So, Minister, the first question that has 16 likes is, if Kiewit holders can access the National Settlement Program, why can't this be expanded to all temporary residents on an as-needed basis?
So look, small problem, the answers didn't come up on the screen.
I'm sorry about that.
I'm kidding, folks, I'm kidding. Look, we tried something new out of necessity when it came to the program to provide a temporary safe haven to Ukrainians fleeing this latest invasion by Putin into Ukraine. I'm hopeful that we can actually learn some lessons from this innovative policy design that might be able to help us have some of these features stick around, and more than settlement services for certain temporary residents, but I think as well the use of temporary safe haven policy, which has been, though there have been some unique challenges along the way, I think largely successful in terms of creating a new pathway for people who might be facing a very serious displacement that may not be permanent. And I'm looking forward to seeing other ways that other lessons we may learn in addition to the settlement services for temporary residents. To the question, one of the challenges that we have is when it comes to our temporary programs, as people in this room will appreciate, they're not limited in number. And it becomes really challenging to build programs when you have no ability to predict how many people are going to use them and the extent to which they're necessary. I think obviously for somebody who's coming as a tourist on a 2-week vacation, we don't want to be putting extensive public funds behind settlement services for people who aren't actually going to stay or who are not going to stay for a significant period of time. But one of the things I've been reflecting on since I've been appointed, and I've got a mandate letter commitment to help expand pathways to permanent residency for international students and temporary foreign workers in particular, is these programs, which are temporary on paper, have become 2-stage processes for many people to become permanent residents. Last year, I believe it was 157,000 new permanent residents actually got their start in Canada as international students. The argument that you shouldn't be providing settlement services to temporary residents is weakened when in fact you establish over time that your temporary programs are creating a pathway to permanent residency. If you're going to be dealing with people who will be here for the long term, it's actually a better investment to make those settlement services available up front. There's some challenges though, because we currently have ballpark 500,000 international student applications come in every year. And we have currently 431,000 permanent residency spaces available in our levels plan. So we're trying to figure out how to design a pathway to permanent residency. And my mind is in a place right now, though I don't intend to announce a new government program this morning, that we have to figure out how to give early supports to the people who are actually on a pathway to permanent residencies on arrival. This is the kind of thing that I'd really value your advice from. If there's ideas that come out of the next couple of days and your work together over the next number of years, this is the kind of thing that we're starting to think on now, but it's not as simple as making a decision today to just expand it to every temporary resident. I think it would become an unwieldy and unmanageable situation that would cause a lot of disruption. But it's the kind of thing that we're starting to think on, and I think the Ukrainian program actually established a precedent that might be somewhat useful in this regard.
Thank you. Minister Fraser, housing is becoming more challenging in every region of Canada. Are there discussions within IRCC or GOC of better aligning immigration levels to housing stock?
Yeah, absolutely there are. It's really funny, the person who sits to my immediate left in the House of Commons is Ahmed Hussein. And our running joke is I sit down and say, Ahmed, if I can continue to increase our immigration numbers, can you build enough houses? And he says, well, it depends. Can you bring enough newcomers with the skills to build houses to make sure we all have a place to live? And there's, though we kind of joke about it, that's part of the solution. The solution to our housing shortage is not to close the door to newcomers. It will never be. It's to build more houses and to better align our immigration destinations with places that have the absorptive capacity, not just in housing, by the way, with public and social services as well, and infrastructure. We need to have a better long-term view of what our communities are going to look like when they're much larger than they are now, and start building today for what that future is going to look like. I mentioned during my remarks the need to embrace regionalization and pushing people to parts of the country that do have a greater absorptive capacity. We also made recent changes to the express entry system that allows us to do targeted draws for people who work in particular sectors or are destined for particular regions or have certain linguistic competencies. We intend to bring skilled workers in larger numbers than was historically the case, who have the ability to work in home building, By actually expanding the stock, by bringing people in with those skills, we're going to help lighten the load. But we also need to push people to parts of the country that have that absorptive capacity. I think the next phase is to do a long-term planning exercise as part of the policy review that we're launching in January, to actually invite communities to start planning for the longer term when they're going to be able to say, how much housing do we need to bring in the people that are going to allow us to keep pace with the growth that the federal government predicts, and in some instances, like my home province of Nova Scotia, which has set a goal to double its population by 2060. If we start planning for that long term, the housing shortage will be something we need to address acutely, but I have all the faith in the world with proper planning. We can actually avoid this being a long-term systemic problem when it comes to the conversation about welcoming large numbers of newcomers.
Thank you. Minister, this is a tough question, and I'm going to ask it because you and I, have already had this conversation before, and I'm looking forward to hearing your response. Minister, please explain the incredible brown and white differences between Canada's response to Afghans and Ukrainians.
Yeah, you know, it's not something that I'm ignorant to, that there's certainly a difference in policy design, but also a perception more broadly about discrimination against people who frankly don't look like me. I think it's important that we continue to advance measures that root out inequality and discrimination, both internal to our department, but also the outward-facing policies that we've put in place. Part of it, I think, has to do with the genesis for each of these programs. And look, we still have had some of the most substantial programs globally in response to both Afghanistan and Syria, and now a unique approach to Ukraine. I don't regret decisions around the Ukrainian program. I think we've seen millions of people fleeing in volumes and with a rapidity that was uncommon, and the values that I think have helped deliver prosperity and peace to Canada for 80 years were under threat with this latest invasion, and I think we had to put our money where our mouth is if we wanted to defend the values that were at risk. But my first reaction on the Russian invasion into Ukraine was to say, okay, we've got precedent with Syria and with Afghanistan to launch a refugee resettlement initiative. And it took me about 8 seconds to realize that wasn't going to work. Our settlement sector was already overburdened to a degree that we couldn't have predicted a few years before when we asked more and more organizations to support Afghan refugees. We didn't have the time as we were dealing with people who had days or weeks to escape, not dealing with a situation like we had in Syria that was 3 years after the civil war had ended when people started coming to Canada. And I learned, sort of watching some of the fallout of the resettlement effort in Afghanistan, the fact that our refugee resettlement program isn't really designed to respond to crises in real time. They're designed very well to help resettle people who've been living in refugee camps or have been in a third country for a number of years. So we tried something new in response to different circumstances. My sincere hope is that this temporary protection model that we've established will have application in different parts of the world where people come from different racial or ethnic backgrounds. We also had a unique challenge that breaks my heart when I meet people who've come from Afghanistan compared to when I meet people who come from Ukraine that are here now. The Ukrainians I've met are hopeful that they can go home. And when they land in an airport, they say, thank you for providing me with a period of time where I can be safe with my family, and I look forward to moving back to my home country when it's safe to do so. It breaks my heart when I talk to some of the people who've landed here from Afghanistan because they don't have that hope. They love their homeland every bit as much as I love mine or Ukrainians love theirs. But the conversations I have indicated to me that the people who are coming through our Afghan program, they're here forever. Their kids are too. They don't think that they're going to be able to suddenly turn the tide against the Taliban and return back to the normal that they'd hoped to build for themselves. When you're dealing with groups of people who are going to come and live in your communities forever, for generations, it becomes a harder thing to manage, and you have to use permanent residency programs because a temporary protection model wouldn't be fair and it wouldn't create the right expectation. So we try to figure these things out in response to individual facts on the ground. No policy is perfect, but my hope is that we've now learned that we have a new policy for people who are displaced on a temporary basis that will be able to apply in different circumstances regardless of where in the world those circumstances may arise.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more?
I'm here.
You're good? Okay, okay. Here's another tough one for you, Minister. Undocumented migrant leaders are in Ottawa today. Will you commit to status for all migrants and families?
I'm actually, when I have to run, I'm running to meet them. So I'm well aware that they're in Ottawa. So we've got some policy work to do to sort out a real challenge around people who are in Canada without status. I've got a mandate letter commitment to expand on some of the work that was done that demonstrated there's real value to providing a pathway to permanent residency for undocumented workers in Canada. In particular, during the pandemic, the Guardian Angels program, or the pilot that we've run with the Canadian Labour Congress in Toronto and Hamilton, fairly small scale, but very useful precedents, I think, to understand what's going on. What I want to do is design a policy that recognizes there's a large number of people who've been here for many years that are ostensibly Canadian. We're dealing with certain kids who are here without status that have been here since they were small children and are now larger children. There's other people who are making an extraordinary contribution, whether they're raising a family here, whether they're working in jobs, and they're doing it under the table. They're not pursuing access to health services. They're not able to pay taxes for fear they're going to be discovered. And I think we would be better off if we created a pathway to permanent residency for a lot of people in these circumstances. At the same time, I've also dealt with cases that involved deportations for people who've committed very serious criminal acts. That's the vast minority of people that we're dealing with. So just doing the thoughtful policy work that creates that pathway for people who are here that can come out of the shadows, it's actually going to serve our interests as a country as well, and allow us to focus our system on the integrity of the immigration system more effectively. It's really expensive to have people living in your communities that don't pursue healthcare when they need it. It's really expensive to set people up knowing that they're more likely to live in poverty and therefore run into greater mental health challenges or greater instances where they run into trouble with the law, tie up the resources of the court system. By actually giving people a pathway, allowing them to work and to make a contribution and to raise their families, I think our long-term interests will be better served. I think we've got some work to design the policy in precisely the right way, but it's something that we're engaged with right now, and literally will be my next meeting when I leave the podium today.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to take the opportunity for one last question, but what I'm going to do is try to blend as much of this in as possible, so I'm kind of cheating a little bit. But the question here is around pre-arrival services, and the question is, pre-arrival services help prepare immigrants to settle and work in Canada. Funding for pre-arrival ends on March 31st, 2023. What are IRCC's plans? Also wondering if maybe you want to loop in IRCC's plans around the QIT visa and ongoing settlement services for Ukrainians.
Okay, well, a lot to work into a very limited amount of time. So look, my general viewpoint is that the more we can do earlier in the process, the better outcomes people are going to experience. That said, we don't want to take decisions like this behind closed doors with folks in IRCC. We want to make sure that we actually engage with the groups that are going to be providing these services and working with people after they arrive. I think we need to continue to have a few conversations before we broadcast where we're going to land with different aspects of settlement support, including pre-arrival services. Right now, the focus that I've got, the QIT has been sort of playing out as the same way for the last number of months. We still have applications that are coming in. Where my head is looking for is we also made a commitment to provide a family reunification pathway for displaced family members of Ukrainian Canadians. That's the next phase to me of where this goes, and obviously when you transition to permanent residency, that comes automatically with access to settlement services. Where I'm thinking about where this goes next is back to the point about whether we can deploy a similar kind of tool in future situations. If we're bringing people in for more than a visit to Canada, who are coming particularly not by their choice but out of necessity, it suggests to me the experience with the QIT program that settlement services are very well placed. However, there are people who will continue to come on a temporary basis who won't need settlement services, or maybe their circumstances will be such that they'll only be here for a short period of time. So we have a little bit of work to do, frankly, when it comes to figuring out next step, both on QIT and on similar kinds of situations that may arise later. But the entire conversation will happen in collaboration with the settlement sector and not in isolation with elected folks and department officials behind closed doors.
Fabulous. Great.
Yes, no, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Minister, for joining us and for fielding some questions and taking the time out to be with us this morning. We really appreciate you welcoming us here today.
Well, thank you. And let me say thank you to everyone in the room. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and I so appreciate the work you do. Thank you.
Now I'd like to call up Jean McRae. Jean is a former and first sector chair of the Pathways to Prosperity Partnership, and we would like to honor her for all her contributions. So Jean is very modest, but I'll just say a few words. Jean has been a very strong supporter of Pathways to Prosperity, and she took on the role of sector co-chair when we were really still getting our legs and trying to figure out who we were. And it was at a time when we were funded by a research organization, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, which Jean often had trouble pronouncing. Jean then helped us to the transition to Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada funding. And as a lead member of CISA-ACSE and the CEO of the Intercultural Association of Greater Victoria, she really helped us to forge the partnership that we now have between P2P and the settlement sector, ensuring that our activities are actually useful and benefit the sector. So thank you, Jean. Her leadership skills, her broad network, her commitment to positive outcomes for newcomers to Canada have really contributed significantly to the success of P2P, and we want to thank her for her dedication and her many contributions. And we would like to present this Legacy Award. So, Jean, in your honor, this award means that each year we will sponsor a newcomer youth to attend the P2P conference. And we'll be, of course, asking for your help in developing the criteria, and we'll be asking you to participate early on in helping us select and evaluate candidates, so more work for you to do. But we appreciate everything you do for us. So thank you, Jean.
Thanks.
From the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Vicki. That's a wonderful honor, and I'm so glad. I have been practicing my no. Would you like to volunteer for this? It's not going that well, but this one I would truly be honored to be helpful with. I want to just say it's just so nice. I've now stepped out of the role, and Katie has capably taken over as co-chair, but it is just so nice to see so many of you in the room. And of course, after this pause that we've had and seeing each other face to face, it's just wonderful to see so many of you here and to know so many of you across the country, because we've built a few skills over the last few years that have made it much easier to include more people in the work that we do. So I just want to thank all of you for being here and for all your support for P2P for 10 years. Unbelievable that we're here. That is really a head shaker. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody.